Hey guys, welcome to the DraftKings Daily Trot podcast today. I'm filling in for Big Italy 42. I'm Scott Malloy, aka sports_25 to life. We've got a really quick 4-game late slate here for MLB today. Should be pretty quick to go through as well. Only 4 games. I'm going to run through them one by one here instead of going position by position because there's just really not enough options at some of these positions to do that today. First game we'll start with is Philadelphia and Washington. This is where you want to target the pitchers at today. The over-under is just set at 6, which is extremely low for a 2-team total here. Hamels making his 3rd start of the season. He got a little roughed up in that first one, but he bounced back nicely against the same Nationals team in his 2nd start. He's actually going to be facing them at Nationals Park today, which makes him a very solid option, probably the best one on the board. He's $10,000 at DraftKings, which makes him a little bit pricey. It's really hard to argue with him today, though, given the fact that there's just not a lot of great pitching options here. And he's the most likely favorite here as well. He's still got an elite strikeout rate. 23.9% of the batters he faced 2014 struck out. So I'm feeling pretty good about his upside here. The guy I'm targeting a little bit more often in cash games, though, is Doug Fister in this same game. $7,700 is a steep price discount from Cole Hamels, and it's really hard not to feel pretty good about that price. He doesn't have quite the strikeout rate that Hamels does. He's much, much lower in that regard, but he's going to be a pretty solid cash game play here for that price. He had his struggles last year, but he's a guy that's been up and down a little bit. I like the matchup. Like I said, the 6-run over-under is really what we're trying to target here. He's still a strong fantasy play, mostly because of his ability to pitch really deep into games. He pitched 6 innings without giving up a run in his first start, and he faces a Phillies offense that so far has looked like one of the worst in the National League. Those are the 2 pitchers I'm liking tonight. I don't love the idea of playing them against each other, especially in GPPs. But in cash games, once we get to the rest of these pitchers here, it's going to be really hard to look at anyone else. As far as that game goes, hitters-wise, I'm not really looking at a ton. As far as Philadelphia goes, Chase Utley and Cody Ash are the 2 guys that I've been playing a decent amount. They've both been really solid against right-handers, but they've gotten off to pretty slow starts to the season. Like we mentioned, the Phillies offense just hasn't been impressive yet. As far as Washington goes, I really like Ryan Zimmerman today. If you're not playing Hamels, I think he's in a really good spot in terms of cash games. Only 4,100 on DraftKings. It's been really, really solid with a WOBA of 343 against lefties in 2014. He's off to a slow start, though, also batting just 4 of 29 on the season. 3 of those extra bases. We know he's got power, especially in the gaps. He's a guy that makes for a solid cash game play most nights, as long as the matchup's okay. If you're looking to target this game a little bit more, maybe a really contrarian stack in GPPs on a 4-game slate, Ian Desmond and Wilson Ramos are 2 guys that I'm also looking at, have great numbers against left-handers. Both of them were over 340 WOBA and 150 ISO in 2014. So those are guys I'm looking to target a little bit in that one. Now we can move into some of the more interesting hitter games. As far as Tampa Bay at Toronto goes, we've got Chris Archer on the mound. He's not a guy I'm looking at really hard. This is the highest over-under of the night at 8.5 right now. He's got a decent strikeout rate. Maybe you could look at him in GPPs a little bit if you're not feeling too good about playing the 2 best pitchers of the slate against each other. He's not a guy I'm targeting actively, though. As far as the Marlins go, I mean, it's just not a great situation with their hitters out there. It's really hard to look away from the first 2 pitchers in that first game. Aaron Sanchez is a guy that's 5,600 on DraftKings, has a decent strikeout rate coming in of just over 22%. He only lasted 3 1/3 innings in his first start, though, against the Orioles. The Orioles have been a really hot hitting team, though, so it's hard to blame him for that. He draws a better matchup today, but he still has to face the Rays in the really hitter-friendly park that is Rogers Center. He's going to be a tough start for me, even at that price, but you can get away with him in GPPs, I think. As far as Tampa Bay's hitters go, Desmond Jennings is a guy I'm looking at pretty heavily, 4,300 on DraftKings. He's been pretty good against right-handed pitching in his career. there really aren't any lefties in the Rays lineup that are just really, really exciting. That was the problem against this right-handed pitcher. That's why Jennings kind of stands out here. Evan Longoria, we mentioned him on the podcast multiple times this week. He's been targeting in cash games pretty often. He's bumped up a little bit to 4,500 on DraftKings, but I think you can still make a solid play out of him. Kevin Kiermaier is a guy I know Big Italy is a big fan of. His price is up to 4,600, but against right-handed pitching, I feel pretty good about rolling him out there. He's at a 218 ISO against righties, so there's definitely some upside here with the power. As far as Toronto goes, you guys know how much I like Jose Reyes early on this season. He's been my top shortstop on some bigger slates. He's going to be my top shortstop again tonight. He's very affordable on DraftKings. He's actually down to 4,600 today. I feel really, really strongly that he's going to be your top shortstop option. As far as the next game, Miami at the New York Mets, pitching's a little rough in this one a little bit also. The over-under is much lower, so you can feel a little bit better about rolling with the pitchers in this one. Jared Kozart's only 6,600. He's okay. His strikeout rate is just so low at 15%, though, that he's really hard to target in GPPs. I'd feel better about him in cash games just because he's playing the Mets, who've struggled a little bit to start the season. Pitcher-friendly Citi Field. It looks like this ballpark is favoring hitters a little bit more this season. I still feel pretty good about targeting Kozart if you're looking for a cheaper pitcher, especially for cash games. Like I said, his strikeout rate just isn't high enough for me to feel really good about him in GPPs. Dylan G, 7,100 on DraftKings. I prefer Kozart if I'm going with someone in this game. He really struggled against the Braves, who I'm just not a fan of their offense this year. He's got a low strikeout rate also. He's just not a guy I'm looking hard at tonight. As far as Miami's hitters, I love D. Gordon also. He's a guy that I'm going to be possibly trying to play with Reyes as my second baseman. He's my secondary shortstop option also. He's been crushing right-handed pitching, and as most of us know, it's easier to steal bases against right-handers too, which is great for him because that's where a lot of his upside comes from because Gordon has very, very little power. Stolen bases are worth 5 points on DraftKings, though. You rack up one or two of those, you're going to have a really nice night. As always with Miami, you can't argue with Giancarlo Stanton, 4,800 on DraftKings. I mean, the guy just speaks for himself. He's been crushing it. As far as the Mets go, I'm not looking at anyone really heavily, which is one of the reasons I'm liking Kozart. I just don't think anyone's matchup really stands out. Lucas Duda is a guy I've been playing a decent amount. He's been really solid against right-handed pitching. I believe he had a 390 WOBA against the righties last year. The rest of these guys have just been struggling to start the season. Daniel Murphy, Curtis Granderson are guys that have decent numbers against righties, but it's just not a situation where I feel good about them, how they're seeing the ball, how the lineup around them has been performing. Duda is probably the only guy I'm feeling like rostering from this one. As we move on to Arizona at San Francisco, the last game of the night, Archie Bradley is a guy that I just don't feel really strongly about. 6,400. He pitched pretty well in his first career start, giving up only one hit in 6 innings of work. He showed some decent strikeout potential in that game, but it's hard to know when you've only seen him pitch one game. And even though the Dodgers lineup's been pretty tough lately, I want to see more before I really trust him. 6,400 is a decent price for him, but he's a guy that has some upside. I like him more as a GPP play today. The over-under on this game is only 6 also, so there's not a whole lot of downside to rostering him here. It'll be interesting to see how he performs in his second start. The other side of this game, Madison Bumgarner, he's probably the other guy in cash games that I'm going to be looking really heavily at. This is just a really strong spot for him. He's awfully expensive. Pairing him with Fister in cash games, I think, is a pretty strong move in terms of price plays because it's going to be really hard to put Bumgarner and Hamels in the same lineup today and get any kind of hitting that you're really looking for in this one with only 4 games because there's just not a ton of value options when there's only 4 games. It's going to be an interesting strategy in tournaments if people can nail some of these hitters when rostering Bumgarner and Hamels together. Like I said, I'm leaning towards Bumgarner and Fister in this one. Bumgarner didn't look good in his first start of the season. I'm not overly worried about it. We know how good of a pitcher he is. He's got an elite strikeout rate, 25% over the last season. He's a really, really strong play today. And for those reasons, I'm not really targeting any Atlanta hitters. If you want to roll Goldschmidt out there as a power play on a roster that you're not playing Bumgarner on, I can't argue with it. Goldschmidt's always got monster power against left-handed pitching, so I feel pretty good about that, especially with the 4,600 price tag. Makes him a really interesting GPP play tonight. As far as San Francisco goes, I'll be looking to target a couple of these hitters against Archie Bradley and just seeing how he does in his second career start. Buster Posey is a guy at catcher that we've been recommending basically every day because he's just so much better of a hitting catcher than most of the other guys out there, especially on a short slate like this. He's been solid against righties. Obviously, that's who he's facing most of the time. 4,300 on DraftKings. If his price stays at this level most of the season, I mean, we're going to be recommending him almost daily at this point. Brandon Belt is the guy that is really interesting to me today. Facing a young pitcher, his ISO against right-handers is 240, which is fantastic. He's a guy that always feels like more of a GPP play. You just never know what you're going to get from him. He's really inconsistent, but obviously the massive power is there, and you have to feel good about it. He's a guy that's really cheap on FanDuel also at 3,200 if you're playing there this evening. Angel Pagan hitting third in the lineup most nights, still only 3,600. 350 Woba versus righties. I think this is a pretty interesting game to kind of like stack up on some hitters because we really just don't know what the Diamondbacks are going to get from Bradley tonight. And there's a lot of upside with this Giants lineup. Even though the names don't really scare you a lot, they've been hitting right-handed pitchers pretty well. And Posey's been doing a great job in the middle of the order getting the job done. That takes us through all the games today. Only 4, like we mentioned tonight. Pretty limited slate. Getting ready for the big Friday slate tomorrow. Feel free to leave us some comments. Find out more at our articles at dailyfantasycafe.com. And good luck tonight.